welcome to another episode of TeaTimeTalks. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday so far. Today I'm joined by a very dear friend of mine and also a wonderful European football journalist, Lee Roden. Lee, how the hell are you, man?
Hello. I'm good, thanks. You've got a delay on this, which means if I swear or say anything that could be potentially pursued by legislation, you can drop it before it goes out, right?
Said like another Scot, Gran the other day said the same thing. He was like, I hope you don't mind that I might drop the little F-bomb on here. I was like, don't worry, man. I grew up with sort of like a swearing sailor in the house with my mother being from Boston. So, it's not an issue.
Boston people are good people.
Exactly. So how are you? How's life here in Sweden, obviously, for those who don't know? How are you holding up in lockdown?
Honestly, pretty good. Like, I've been thinking about this, relatively speaking, I have very little to complain about. Worst case scenario, occasionally it's a little bit like Groundhog Day, and, it would be nice to do something other than be in the house and then get like a 5-minute walk every day. But compared to most other people, I'm working, I can pay my rent, I'm healthy. Yeah. What more can you ask for at this moment in time?
And you did a picnic today too, right? So at least you got to go outside.
A picnic. Which basically means I moved about 5 meters from where I normally sit and eat my food to in front of my window instead of behind it. But yeah, it was nice. The spring's here now and it's sunny, so yeah.
Well, I can see it. There's so much sunshine, coming straight through the window into your face. I mean, that's nice, obviously. And before we dive into the whole, football aspect of life, I would love to talk a little bit about what's going on in Sweden, because it's really an interesting case, isn't it? Or experiment, as they're calling it, compared to the rest of Europe. They've really gone their own sort of way, haven't they, about approaching the whole coronavirus situation. In other words, it's sort of like half lockdown, right? I mean, people still allowed to go outdoors, some restaurants, bars, schools, and so on, still kind of open. But at the same time, I imagine people are respecting, the space. They do anyway, right? I mean, it's a huge country, huge landmass, not a big population in general. But how is it working? I mean, do you feel that it's going all right?
It's interesting because there's been a lot of international media coverage of this because it's people sort of realize now that there's something different happening here, but a lot of it's not been very, I don't know, I take a bit of issue with it. A lot of it's not been particularly well researched, and you get a problem often with small countries where, because there isn't usually that much international interest, there aren't that many correspondents here.
Sure.
So when a story happens like this, like once every 5 years or whatever, you suddenly get a bunch of people who are rushing to write about it who maybe don't have the context, they don't have the language, they don't understand the structures of the system here that's sufficiently to be able to give you like an accurate representation of it.
Right.
So what's happened is that, we're not locked in our houses, basically. Yeah. But a bunch of stuff has happened that means our lives are very much different. So, I mean, most people who to any extent can are working from home, for example. The subway and the buses are still running, but they're more or less empty. There might be an odd exception at a certain time of the day when people are going to do like essential jobs or whatever. And then there's like a ban on gatherings of people over 50, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, it means that no concerts, no cinemas, a lot of stuff is cut out by that anyway.
Yeah.
And then they sort of appeal to people to be responsible and act responsibly in general, and don't like go into crowds, don't like be too go into congested areas, don't like pile up in restaurants. The restaurants have got rules about how they should space people out.
Right.
Honestly, I've not been to a restaurant in like a month and a bit, so it's kind of, and I think a lot of people it's the same. They're just making their own decisions to avoid it. But the theory here is, and interestingly, the longer it goes on, the more I think it's starting to gain a little bit of weight, because other countries nearby are now starting to change and relax a little bit, is that a lockdown isn't sustainable, like either economically nor in terms of health, because if you lock people in their house, then you get a bunch of other problems that happen because of that.
Especially mental health too, yeah.
Exactly. So the theory is that, well, we'll try and keep the risk group as protected as possible. And then everyone else, we ask you to be responsible, but in like a sustainable way, because we think this could go on for a while.
Right.
So it's better to try and make it sustainable over the long term than put it off for a month and a half and then just get hit with it all anyway.
So it's just mitigation, basically, rather than trying to put a full stop to it. Yeah.
And the data, like the thing with this, I mean, if you can't tell, I've been working on this pretty much full time for the last month. So this is all that's been going on in my head. But the data, there's a lag behind. So like whenever you take a measure, you don't really see the effects until about 3 weeks, I think, or 2 weeks afterwards. But now we're seeing like the last week here, there's like a clear stabilization in terms of the number of people who are coming into hospital.
Okay.
That seems to have flattened out. And if it continues like that, it's encouraging. But now the hard part is obviously everyone needs to kind of keep their discipline, because it's going to be around for a while, I think. But at least with what we've got here, it feels like we can live with that for a while, because we're pretty lucky compared to most people, I think.
Well, let's talk about you, because you have such a fascinating background. As I already said, you're obviously Scottish, but you are Scottish, now Swedish, speak fluent Swedish, also speak fluent Catalan. You are one of the rare people who come to Spain to not actually learn Spanish, but to learn Catalan, which I think is fascinating in and of itself. You've lived, in London and Sweden and Spain and Scotland. You've lived all over the place as well. You have such an interesting patchwork that has really made you obviously who you are, but it also gives you such an interesting perspective on the way that you approach writing about football too. I mean, so how did you actually, and this is actually one of the questions to you from someone who's watching us right now. He wants to know how you actually fell in love with football, and what was it that got you into the idea of becoming a football journalist, really?
Yeah, I have this is a weird one. I have an unusual relationship with football in the same way that I probably have an unusual career path. Because I often get, occasionally people ask me, I really want to get into the industry. How can I do it? And I'm like, well, trying to do it my way is probably not the best way, because it's not the most straightforward. But anyway, so when I was a kid, it was like my big brother was really into football, big time. So anyone who doesn't live in Glasgow or isn't familiar with Scottish football, there's like Rangers, especially if you're in the central belt of Scotland. Rangers and Celtic are like these sort of dominant forces and very polarised forces to as great a degree as any other rivalry in world football.
And also they have the religious aspect too, right? Like one is Protestant, one is Catholic or something like, is that right?
So exactly. And that's kind of important. So my mum is a Celtic fan. My brother is a Rangers fan, I think purely to annoy my mum when he was a kid. So because of that, I kind of always put me off, and the only team I really cared about was Scotland.
Right.
So I was like national team first and foremost, nothing else really for a long time. So like all my oldest memories in football are to do with Scotland, like the 1998 World Cup and memories of that. But then, there was a while in my sort of teenage years where I'm a musician as well, because I play guitar and a few other things. But so I got kind of obsessed with that and sort of forgot about football for a while. And then I think around about 2006, 2007, maybe curiously enough, when Henrik Larsson was at Barcelona, I sort of started to fall in love with it again, and get interested. And it was Spanish football that gripped me more than anything. So in an indirect way, people like Graham are responsible for the unfortunate fact that I'm doing this right now.
I'm sure I'll be delighted to hear that.
Yeah. And then, I mean, this is probably not super interesting, but essentially when I was 15, 16, maybe, I went on exchange to Mallorca with my high school. Mm-hmm. And I met a couple of friends there who were from Mallorca, but then moved to Barcelona. And so when they moved to study in Barcelona, I went to visit them a couple of times, and I was like, hey, this is cool. I could live here. I like this place. And then when I was at university, one summer I went out to learn Catalan. I already spoke Spanish. I learned that at school, and I did it a little bit at university as well. So I went out to Sitges, actually, not Barcelona, for a summer and learned Catalan from a family there, which was fun. Yeah. And then I've always had this kind of split thing pulling me in loads of different directions ever since. And then my wife's Swedish, so yeah, that explains the Swedish connection. Yeah.
So I have a completely random sidebar question for you. Just because I'm sure you've seen the English game, and a lot of us, I think, have seen the English game, and obviously, have you not seen it? Okay, well, fine, never mind. But anyway, my question is totally unrelated to the fact whether you watch it or not. But the two main characters, right? Fergus Suter, if I can try and do it. That's really terrible. Sorry, and Jimmy Love. Obviously, they've come to the forefront now because of the series, but in Scotland, have they always been well known? Were they prominent figures in football? No,
not that. So
really.
Let me assume from my knowledge of the English game, which is having seen the little image on Netflix and then promptly turn to the next thing. I'm assuming it's about the start of football and when it was sort of spread out to the world, maybe?
It was like the Victorian era, so late 1800s, and it was like they were the two basically first professional paid footballers. Yeah. So
the ironic thing about football, and in particular football with Scotland, is that Scotland in the early days was known for inventing essentially the passing game.
Right.
So we were the first people to decide, oh, instead of just dribbling, like all of us running at people in a sort of crazy, unorganized mess, why don't we try passing the ball and then maybe we can get around there? So indirectly, Spain's 2010 World Cup win was thanks to us, which I think we should all draw a line
I really
under.
think we deserve some credit,
Yeah.
For...
But I don't know how good we are at that in Scotland in general. I think we're good at recognising people from a certain era onwards, from around about the 1970s or 60s
So
or there.
like Fergie, obviously, being a big one.
Yeah, and then back to when Celtic won a European Cup, which was an incredible feat because it was with people basically born in the Glasgow region that won it. And they broke Catenaccio playing this sort of exciting attacking football, pushing fullbacks high up the pitch. There's a lot of innovation in Scottish football at various times. But to come back to my original point, and this isn't a complete tangent, is that we're not so good, I don't think, at recognising the people who did things earlier on, because Scotland was kind of pioneers in football, and part of, just like England, of course, we took it to other countries by travelling over as part of the Industrial Revolution. So in Spain, for example, it was like Scots were playing up in Catalonia and the Basque Country, were the people that sort of brought football to those regions, along with English people. And there are really interesting stories about Scottish players at FC Barcelona in the early days, for example. Like one of their greatest strikers, Patullo, is Scottish, who set a bunch of goal scoring records. And there was even, which is one of my favourite stories to tell, Barca for like about a year and a half, 2 years, had a ban on Scottish players.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Because there was a team called FC Escocés, so like FC Scottish, if you like, and which became San Andreu later down the line. But they played Barcelona a couple of times, and I think they were considered to be so dirty or so like underhand when they played that Barca was like, these Scottish people are trouble, man. We need to make sure they don't get near our club. So yeah, we have a long history of ruining football for everyone. I don't know how I got there, but there you go.
What a great reputation you Scottish people and footballers have then in the world of modern football. So anyway, going back to modern times, actually, we have another question for you from Fabul, and he wants to know what your most memorable Old Firm derby is, the year, and why.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, because I'm not neither Celtic nor Rangers, and it always kind of repelled me a little bit. But to be fair, I mean, I've seen a lot of them over the years, and a lot of them kind of happened. A lot of my memories are like sort of Boxing Day or New Year's time, these kind of games. But the time that I remember the most was probably when Henke Larsson was at Celtic. Okay. Henke Larsson, that sounds so Swedish when I say that. Henrik Larsson to everyone else.
How do you pronounce it the Swedish way?
Henke Larsson. Henke's like his nickname.
Oh, right, okay.
But yeah, so around about that time, and I also remember when Brian Laudrup was at Rangers. So we were kind of lucky that we had two genuinely world-class players and Scottish football, the two biggest teams, that sort of back-to-back. I don't think they overlapped. I can't remember. If they did, it was very brief. But so I kind of remember a fair bit from that time period. But to be honest, and maybe it's not what everyone wants to hear, but a lot of the things I remember about the Old Firm derby when I was a kid was that, like, that day I probably shouldn't go into Glasgow because there's going to be trouble. So a lot of that sort of stuff is what really stuck in my mind. It took me a long time to sort of reconcile all that, I think, and that maybe pushed me away from football a little bit when I was a kid.
Is it still like that now, would you say? Or do you think it's changed? It's a bit more time?
The problem is I've not lived in Scotland since 2011, I think, or early.
That's true. You've been gone for a long time, haven't you?
Hard for me to say, but I think my understanding is that especially when Rangers went down and were away for a while, I think it's maybe sort of calmed down a little bit. But I'm not really the best qualified person to say it, really. But I hope not.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about some of the football that's happening in Sweden, because you're obviously an expert when it comes to Swedish football, and all of us are starved for football at the moment, even though we know that it takes a backseat to the pandemic and to everybody's health and safety. But we have been able to see a bit of football in terms of training sessions, right? Because Swedish football is still very actively, I mean, they're allowed to train, they're still allowed to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm sure many of you have heard Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He bought a stake in Hammarby Football Club, which is one of the local clubs in Stockholm, which is where you are based. It also happens to be very much your club. You're very passionate about it, and by default then it's also mine.
Uh-oh.
So, well, you already know that. But anyway, so we've seen him actually out training on a regular basis with the players, because he can't be in Italy, or he chooses not to be in Italy. There's no football going on and everything. So it's kind of fun to think about the fact that maybe in some hypothetical situation he could actually end up playing for Hammarby right? I mean, could you picture a scenario where that ends up happening whenever Messi is done with his time in Milan?
It's difficult. So I don't know. The first thing to qualify this with is the world has been turned on its head. So trying to make any kind of normal assessment of the situation is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, in principle, I would say no, he wouldn't, because he's not really expressed any great desire to do it in the past when he's been asked about it. But on the other hand, and I mean this with all respect in the world, you can't take anything Zlatan says seriously. I mean, he changes like the wind, honestly, and depending on the interview, depending on who he's speaking to, depending on what kind of message he wants to get out, he'll say one thing or the other.
And what is true depends on the mood that he's in that day too. So.
Yeah, but I mean, he's trained, I think, 4 times now, 3 or 4 times. So there are no matches here. Of course, there's no football. Allsvenskan should have started in April, but it's been delayed. They hope to maybe start it in June, but I think we'll see. Possibly, given the situation in Sweden, they might be able to do that, but it won't be a regular start anyway. And yeah, so he has a 25% stake in Hammarby, which he bought, I think it was the start of this year or tail end of last year. And he's in Sweden because his wife and his kids still live in Stockholm. Actually, they don't live in Milan with him. Okay. And his oldest son, is now training with Hammarby's kids, so he's in the academy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he's been training with Hammarby 3 or 4 times. The most recent one, the club obviously realised they're getting a lot of attention for this, so they started to stream their training sessions. So the most recent one, they played like 5v5s, I think, and Zlatan was up front and scored a really nice kind of bicycle kick goal, actually. But the latest is that apparently, according to Gazzetta, I think it was, Milan have recalled all their foreign players.
Right. And
they want them to come back and then sit in 2 weeks quarantine ahead of potentially playing, which, I mean, I'm not an expert on Italian football, but I think that's ambitious that they're going to be playing anytime there soon. So then the question...
with that. Yeah.
What happens? I mean, it might well be that Zlatan sort of says, well, guys, given the current situation in the world, I'm not so happy going back to Italy at the moment. I'd rather stay here with my family and just keep fit. Yeah. So I think we'll find out over the next week. Normally, I would say it's an insane idea, but that he would join Hammarby because, again, there's a few various reasons. He's never expressed a desire to go back to Allsvenskan, but he seems to be enjoying himself a lot. And there are quite a few players there at the club who he knows well. And Muammar Tankovic, who's like one of the best players, who used to be at Fulham and who Zlatan knows from the Swedish national team, is there, and there are a couple of others. And he looks happy. And honestly, the other thing is I think that helps is that Hammarby play a particular kind of football. So last year they sort of matched, I think, the goal scored record in Allsvenskan, and they've got a really sort of cutting edge analytics department who do a lot to make sure they create the most goal chances possible and are as efficient with them as possible. So if he was going to go anywhere that was a step down, then I think they would be a decent shout. But I don't know. There's a lot of different things need to fall in line for it to happen in the first place. I still think the most likely thing is that he goes back to Milan at least until the end of his current deal, and then whether he extends or not, because I think he's got an option for another year, is a different question. But we'll see.
And how's it gone down, obviously, because he's a Malmö legend, or at least was, maybe up until now, and we saw what happened to the statue outside of the ground, right? So, I mean, how has it gone down amongst the Malmö fans, the fact that he has decided to buy a stake in Hammarby and what he's doing with the club?
I think my impression is that now the sort of him training with Hammarby doesn't really bother them so much anymore because they're already kind of over it. That's the impression I get. But the buying a stake in Hammarby definitely did not go down well. They took it really, really badly, and I can respect that. Yeah. But there's two sides to this argument. I mean, one side that maybe Zlatan would argue, and maybe some people in his favour would argue, is that when he left Malmö, he left them a lot of money for starters, and then he was also kind of without getting into the territory of potential slander or whatever. He was screwed out of some money by some people who were involved there when he moved to Ajax, and he was very hurt by that and unhappy with it. Right. And that's not Malmö's responsibility, but it is the responsibility of someone that was there at the time. And I think that definitely changed something in the relationship with him.
It left a sour taste, when he left him.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think it's almost not even... My impression is it's almost not even the fact that he bought a stake in Hammarby, which is, if you're a Malmö fan, you'd be annoyed with that. But it's also the way he went about it, maybe. He sort of came out and said, this is like the club with the most potential to be the biggest in Scandinavia. And he didn't go about it in the most tactful way, you could say. which is consistent with Zlatan, but also not the way to maintain friends at somewhere that has a sort of deep-rooted connection with you. But Malmö get over it. I think they already are over it, to be honest. They've got bigger things to concern themselves with. They're a very successful club, and they're doing really well. So in the long term, I think it will probably die down fairly. The first match between Hammarby and Malmö, though, is going to be pretty crazy whenever it happens.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see for sure. So you could argue that Zlatan is very much sort of the past, but in terms of, Scandinavians or Swedes really specifically doing really well in some of the big 5 European leagues. But then if you look to the future, or somebody who has a very bright future ahead of him, that's Alexander Isak, who is obviously at Real Sociedad. He's in LaLiga. He's doing really well. There's been rumors that maybe Barcelona are interested in requiring or hiring his services, paying at the 70 million fee, I think it is, the retainer fee, whatever it is, in his contract. But again, I mean, I think we're a long way off from seeing whether that actually is going to become a reality. But just to play devil's advocate, if it were to actually happen, do you think that he would be a good fit for Barcelona and that it would work with him as a long-term replacement for Luis Suarez and to play alongside people like Messi and Griezmann?
I mean, on paper, like technically and tactically and in terms of potential, absolutely think he's a good fit for them. I mean, we have to keep in mind that probably the team playing the football that's closest to what you would consider Barcelona football in La Liga right now, or I guess a couple of months ago, is Real Sociedad. It's not even Barcelona. Yeah. And he excels in that system. He's fast over a short distance. He has a great first touch. He's intelligent in how he moves. He's a good finisher. And he's only 20. He might be 21 now, but he's ridiculously young. I mean, he's doing things at an age and a much, much higher level than Zlatan Ibrahimovic was doing. I mean, when he was Isak's age, he was still playing in Sweden. I think he might just have been about to move to Ajax. But so this kid, you can't overstate how good he is, and also how quickly he seems to adapt to stepping up a level. I mean, I tell this story a lot, but I know people who are coaches here who watched him when he was 16 playing for AIK, or AIK as they're called in English, and he was taking the piss out of people that were seasoned professionals when he's a 16-year-old kid. So he's very, very good. But then a different question is that a lot of very, very good players have gone to Barcelona, and in particular in recent years, and it hasn't worked out for them because it's a very special, shall we say, environment.
But even Zlatan didn't work at Barcelona either. I mean, he came and went,
Yeah.
Obviously, different times, different situation, different coach, all that kind of stuff too. But even still.
I think Isak's personality is probably a better fit than Zlatan's because he's an incredibly humble kid. Yeah. At the same time, he's also incredibly confident, but he balances it in a way that really makes you think he has everything, because talent, there's no doubt. But he knows he's good, but he knows he can be even better. So when you speak to him often after a game, even when he's done really well, he'll be like, it's fine, but I can do more. And that's a good sign, I think, for any kid that want to try and progress up the levels as quickly as possible. So
and talking to players such as Isak himself and Martin Odegaard. I mean, both you and Alex Johnson, you have a really fun podcast which focus on Scandinavians in La Liga and elsewhere, right? And you guys quite often after games do get the chance to talk to them directly. So I mean, it's really nice that you guys have that access and that ability to talk to them on a regular basis. They know who you guys are, and they're giving you a lot of great, feedback and information as to how they are progressing over the course of the season.
We're lucky that I think, and this is a generalization, but I think it's true, in the sort of Nordic countries in general, there's a much healthier relationship between players and the media. There's much more of a culture of openness and trust, and maybe you could argue that part of that is because there are certain standards that journalists also make sure they adhere to here, where they don't, they understand it's give and take a little. And then, I mean, for the most part as well, it's down to Alex. She has a really, really good relationship with the people at Real Sociedad, so I can sometimes take advantage of that too. And she's been very intelligent in how she's built that up, and also very fair. And I think it's also you ask the right questions. When you get a chance to speak to these people, you try and be original, but you also try and be fair to them, and they seem to appreciate that. So we're lucky. It's been a great season to launch something like that. We really couldn't have imagined how many things would happen, not just with them, but with Martin Brathwaite going to Barcelona.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's been the best thing about the pod so far?
I don't know if it's just the chance to the nice thing about it has been as I do, whenever you're a journalist, you're always working to someone else's editorial guidelines, right? So you get a certain amount of freedom, but you've always got someone in charge who's saying, but we should focus on this or that, and with good reason, like logically. But with this, we've kind of had complete freedom to just do what we want and we decide, and that's been really nice. And, you're not constantly, we're trying to think more niche than big as well in that regard. We're not always trying to chase like how many, like what's the maximum number of listeners we can get. More we've been thinking, okay, what's the like, how can we get like a sort of core audience and keep them interested by like maybe dealing with some things that they've not heard answered before. And that's been nice. That kind of freedom has been pretty liberating, actually. It's been fun.
Yeah,
shame I had to pause.
Oh, sorry, what?
Just a shame I had to pause because of everything that happened, really, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, also it's been working really well, and it's been a joy to listen to. So for those of you who hadn't had a chance to watch or to listen to it, sorry, you definitely need to go check it out. So speaking of the Scandinavians over the years, or the history of LaLiga specifically, obviously some big names have come through there. You already talked about Henrik Larsson, there's Michael Laudrup as well, but who for you would you say are some of the other maybe lesser known people, or people who haven't gotten as much respect as they deserve for what they did in Spanish football?
Yeah, a big one is Henry Carlson, who was a striker for Atletico Madrid in the 1950s and won 2 league titles with them. I think he won them back to back, actually. And for a club that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Atleti still only have 10 league titles or thereabouts. So to win 2 with them, there's not many players that have done that. And he's genuinely an Atletico Madrid legend. Like, he played over 100 games for them, so I'm assuming he has a plaque outside the Wanda.
Sure, yeah.
But that he's very, very fondly remembered that club. And actually, a really nice thing happened in the summer when Atleti were here, because they played in Stockholm in a friendly against Juve. They invited his family to the game, who are still here in Sweden, and they presented them with, like, I think Alvaro Morata's match-worn shirt and things like that. So that was really nice, because it's like not always have Spanish football clubs been so good about sort of paying tribute to their history and acknowledging it, and Atletico really did do that.
That's true,
So I think that was really cool, and he's a player I think I would love to hear more about him, and a bit more detail about them, because there's not that much, because from everyone that was around or what you hear about him, he's a very, very good goal scorer.
Well, there's a task for you. You should get in touch with him, reach out to him. Maybe you can be the person to find out more about him.
Yeah, his family they're here in Stockholm, so there are people. Me and Alex have talked about this. So at some point, we'd like to try and see if we can do something with the podcast to sort of honor his legend, if you like, in his memory.
That'd be brilliant.
And then, there's a bunch of other people over the years that maybe don't sort of stand out because they weren't strikers or didn't play in the more sort of interesting positions. But Joachim Björklund, who played at Valencia as a defender, played in 2 Champions League finals with them, and won a Copa del Rey with them as well at that sort of period at the late 90s, early 2000s, when Valencia started to sort of surge up again. Was very good. And then the other one that me and Alex did a podcast about partly is Kennedy Bakasiroglu, who's like a Hammarby legend. He's literally the legend of legends at Hammarby. He was at Racing Santander when they were still in La Liga, and his first season was probably their best player, I think. He was a really, really talented footballer. So, and then there's all the obvious people. We know about Zlatan, we know about Henke Larsson and these people. But and then in terms of other Scandinavians, there's obviously John Carew, people know about as a very, very talented forward player. But the one that really, it gets hard to shake the dominance of Laudrup, I think. Yeah. We did a podcast about this, and we also spoke to Morten Greenblad, who may be biased, but is a very good Danish Spanish football journalist extensively. But really, when you look at it, like, there's like a before and after Laudrup, and not just Barcelona, but also in Spanish football in general. And he's influenced so many players over the years since that it's hard to knock him off the top of the sort of Mount Rushmore of Scandinavians and La Liga, I think.
Brilliant. So we have a couple of questions coming in for you from people who are fans who are watching right now. So the first of which, this is interesting actually, from Fabul again, wants to know before the coronavirus pandemic what the state of finances in Swedish football was, if you happen to know anything about that.
Yeah, so it depends. Well, the TV deal, ironically enough, the TV deal that kicked in this year, or should have kicked in this year, was huge. I think most clubs were going to be making at least double what they were making before. It was Discovery, the sort of Scandinavian branch of Discovery, bought the rights for Allsvenskan and put quite a lot of money into it.
Oh, right.
And then there's quite a big disparity between the different clubs. Like Malmö are in exceptional financial condition. They've been really, really clever with their money. So, I don't know if anyone knows, but there's the 50+1 rule here, kind of like you have in Germany. So It's not like It's not like you can get a Newcastle United. Like someone can't just come in and buy a club and plough tons of money into it. There's a limit to that, and that's all to do with the sort of key culture around Allsvenskan is that the fans are the most important, first and foremost. It shouldn't be a way of making money, it should be a way of pleasing the fans. But Malmö, because they've been really smart about how they've built in terms of trying to get into Europe, so they played 2 Champions League group stages and now 2 Europa League, back-to-back Europa League knockout stages actually in the last 2 years, which for a club from Sweden is really good. They've made a lot of money through that, but they've saved it, sort of put it away for a rainy day fund, if you like, and maybe invested in their youth academy and sort of more long-term things. Nice. So they're sitting on a massive pile of money. And then there's a few other clubs like Hammarby are in fairly decent state financially as well, after a couple of rough years. And then at the other end of the spectrum is clubs like, don't know if you remember Östersunds, who played at the Athletic Club in the Europa League, and I think they played Hertha Berlin and a couple others. They put out a couple of big teams a few years back and then eventually went out to Arsenal, but they won at the Emirates. Graham Potter was their coach at the time, who's now a Brighton coach. They are in like dire financial straits. I mean, they were close to, really, really close to going bust for a bunch of really complicated reasons. So there's quite a wide range just in the top flight alone, depending on how things have gone in the recent history. But the long and short of it is more money is coming in if and when it starts this season. The question is how many clubs survive the sort of gap in income, because they would have expected to have been playing by now, and gate money from the fans coming in is very important, and they're missing out on that right now. So we'll see, touch wood.
No, for sure. It'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years in the investment, I guess, of all of the money that's getting put into the league. Now, this question is a personal one for you, and you've obviously been to hundreds, if not thousands by now, of games over the years, all over the world, of all different competitions. But they want to know what your most memorable game is that you ever reported on. And I imagine this has got to be a really difficult choice for you. But if you had to pick one...
Do you know, it's actually not that. There's a couple that definitely stick out. So one of them was I was at Barcelona 1. Yeah. Well, actually,
there's got to be a Girona game in there somewhere.
There's definitely. No, Barca is 1-1 with Atleti when Atletico won the league at Camp Nou. I was at that game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that, I think that's the first, maybe the last time I've ever been at a game where I was like, I'm witnessing history right now. I could feel it. There was something, and I think everyone that was there was asking anyone else, any other journalists that were there as well. It was, I don't know, you knew everything about it, and then it was from the fact that they finally did it and they took the title, but also like the Camp Nou applauding them, and then I have this really like just burned into my mind when the celebrations are going on the pitch, Diego Simeone coming over to the edge of the pitch and then like climbing the barricade to like celebrate with the fans, and then even in his presser afterwards, he brought his entire coaching team in. He said that, like, today I'm going to sit down with these guys because these are the people you don't see that are behind all this work that have made us achieve this. So everything about it felt historic, and it's hard to get away from that, to be honest. That's the one that kind of sits there the most. And then I've been to some, like, I went to a really cool a playoff match for, would it have been Euro 20, when was the last Euros? 2016, was it?
2016, yeah.
So I think it might have been the one before. No, it was Euro 2016. I went to the Sweden-Denmark playoff in Copenhagen. Which, like, in terms of like Scandinavian rivalries, that's probably the most fierce one between the two different countries because of various games that have happened over the years. And the atmosphere of that was incredible. Like, I think Parken, the Danish national stadium, which is also used by FC Copenhagen, is one of my favourite stadiums. There's just something about it. I don't know. It's got like proper steep stands. It looks kind of old school. And the fans that night were unreal, and then Zlatan Ibrahimovic just completely annihilated them. I mean, in terms of individual performances. And then there was another one I was thinking as well. It took me a while to think of this. I've been to so many Classicos over the year.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, haven't you?
They tend not to stick in my mind so much, but I was at the Classico when I think Messi scored 2 and Ronaldo scored 2.
Is this the game that ended 4-3 at the Bernabeu?
No, it was at Camp Nou. It was when Tito Villanova was coach, I think. And it might even have been my first Classico, I think. It was my first Classico, was definitely as a journalist anyway. And both, like, that night, I think more so than any other, it was just so obvious that those two were trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
It's like one of them would do something ridiculous and the other one would do something ridiculous and the other one would do something ridiculous. And it was like this constant like one-upmanship, and they were both at the sort of peak of their powers at that time. It was pretty special. And then the most recent one that I went to last year, in fact, it must have been around about this time last year, was the Seville Derby.
I was going to say, yeah. I remember, like, in the months leading up to the game, you were like, do I go? Should I go? Can I go? You got to go, man. And then you were super excited about it. It was like the one game in Spanish football that you were like, I have to do this before I leave the country. Yeah. And it lived up to your expectations, right? I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so like the boring side of it is like, so we obviously we're at LaLiga TV working, and I'd do like Monday to Friday LaLiga TV, and then the weekends I would sort of travel around and talk sport because I apparently don't like time off. The Seville derby, it sort of happened that I think it was just before the start of Semana Santa. So for anyone who doesn't know, like,
that's right.
Trying to get to Seville at Semana Santa, if you've not booked it way in advance, is pretty hard work. So in the end, I paid stupid. I mean, I made no money from it. Like, in the end, the expenses were way more.
Yeah, but it was worth it. It was worth the experience.
And it was, the coolest thing about it was, like, the sort of sidebar to it was I got my Ryanair flight, which is always a bad thing. Left at like 6 a.m, I think, so I had to get up at like, I don't know, 3:30 or something to get to the airport in time. But as I was landing the flight into Seville, I was reading, like, I must have picked up, like, maybe I picked up Marca or I picked up something, and I only finally, it's a really short flight, it got around to the end, and I like realised that Betis and Sevilla's women's teams were playing the same day.
Oh, that's right, so, I remember this, yeah.
So that was so cool. So it was like a derby. I landed, got a taxi to Benito Villamarin, bought a ticket, went into that derby for about 10 seconds until I messed up and had to leave, but that's a different story.
I remember that too.
Got to hear the Betis anthem and everything, and there was a lot of people there. Like, I think it was at least 25,000 maybe, or around about that, were there for that.
Yeah.
And then, I had a day in Seville, which is one of my favourite cities anyway. And then went to the game at night with Alex, actually. Alex was there as well. We watched, like, went to see where the bus comes into leaves from the hotel, the concentration. That's not a thing in English, is it?
No, it's not a good thing.
Like
the team gathering, hotel. Basically.
Yeah,
like the team
exactly.
meeting, when they all get together, yeah.
Yeah. And it was nuts, man. There was, like, coaching staff hanging out the windows, like, people climbing on top of bus stops, setting off flares. And then the game itself was incredible. I mean, I've been to the Sanchez Pizjuan before, but for the derby, it's something else. It's a different world. It's the one game, I think, if anyone wants to... If there's one game, if you, like, absolutely say you have, like, the sort of one-time ticket to see a game in Spanish football that you're going to put some money into or whatever, forget about the Clásico, all that. Just go to the Seville derby. For me, it's like there's no doubt about it in my mind.
Well, I think anybody who follows Spanish football would say the same, quite honestly. So
yeah,
I mean...
yeah, exactly.
And have you set your sights on anything? Is there something that you really want to do, a game that you really want to cover, or any competition that you really want to go to cover as well? Is there anything that you still have sort of out there that you want to achieve? Yeah,
there's a few. I mean, there's always a few. Like, always in the back of my mind, I wanted to go to Argentina and see some football there.
Oh, right.
And I've always been there.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, just to experience it, I think. But I've never really managed to make the stars align. And then I was really looking forward. It's a shame. I was looking forward to the Euros this summer, and because hopefully going to I should have been working at the Copenhagen Games. And one of the potential outcomes, and there's a lot of things that had to fall in line for it to happen, but it's not that unfathomable, is that Sweden and Norway could have met in the first knockout round in Denmark, and that would have been pretty special. And then the other one, but still in the back of my mind, is that because Scotland haven't qualified for a major tournament since 1998, and there's a small part of me still like, one day I hope I can go and, if not cover, at least go and see Scotland playing at a tournament, because it's been long overdue, but we'll see.
Well, there's time yet, so don't give up completely. So, all right, I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time, so just throw a couple more questions at you, and then I'll let you go back to your wonderful picnic. That I'm very jealous of, by the way.
Don't be too jealous. It's really...
So, someone wants to know if you plan on writing a book.
Yeah, I've thought about this, actually.
Yeah.
You know that, like,
what would it be about?
Well, that's the problem.
Okay. You could do like a mixture of football and music. Some kind of, I don't know. You could find some way of bridging the two worlds.
Do you know, I have thought about this. Part of the problem is, I think the things that I find particularly interesting are not necessarily the things that other people would find particularly interesting.
Well, you never know.
I would really like to write something about, and I'll have to explain why this is interesting, the IFK Göteborg or IFK Gothenburg team from like the late 70s, early 80s, right. Who there's been a really good documentary made about them, but not that much written in English, who were a team of semi-amateurs, essentially. So like a lot of these people were playing football or training at night, but during the day we're working as like welders or working on the docks or whatever. And they're the team that like, famously beat Barcelona in the first leg of a European Cup knockout round in the 80s. But then they also won 2 UEFA Cups.
Oh wow! Okay.
Sven-Göran Eriksson was there as well. It was kind of where he cut his teeth. But that achievement, no other Scandinavian team since has won a European tournament, and they did it twice. And they did it beating some really, really good teams, and quite a few of the players went on to have quite a lot of success. So Glenn Hussein, who was one of the defenders, won what was Liverpool's last league title to date. He was part of that team. Glenn Sternberg went and played in Italy for a long time. They're a really interesting team, but also that it's like a remnant of a football world doesn't exist now. I mean, there's no way that you could, as a part-timer, like semi-amateur, go and beat Barcelona or go and win like the Europa League or whatever. I mean, it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of good stories to tell from that. And I'd be interested in like sort of speaking to those people whilst they're still able to remember everything that happened, basically. And then, I don't know, apart from that, there are a bunch of small things that interest me. But I'm also conscious whenever I think about this, like, what would anyone actually care about?
Well, listen, honestly, like, okay, in the comments right now, no joke, you have a serious amount of encouragement saying, please 4 times. So please write. Please write about it. So clearly somebody really wants you to write this book. So there you go. Someone is very interested. And so at least, you do have people who are behind you. And actually, it does sound like a really cool thing to write about, quite honestly, because these are stories that are going to be lost over time, and if we don't write about them now, we don't preserve them, they're going forever, so
I think there's something about that city that appeals to me as well, because it's a little bit like, it reminds me a little bit of Glasgow or like Liverpool or somewhere like that. They're very like I don't know, they overlooked sort of second cities or whatever in countries that the more kind of working class, like industrial cities where things are a little bit different. And I don't know.
Got the magic and history of Pele too, right? I mean, which is something you taught me about, really.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, so Pele, that's a cool one. Yeah, so Ullevi, one of the Ullevis, New Ullevi is the name of the stadium, but ironically enough, it's older than what is currently called Old Ullevi, which is the stadium next to it. That's a long story. Anyway, it was one of the grounds used at the 1958 World Cup, and Pele made his World Cup debut there. But you wouldn't know it. There's like no recognition of it or anything. I'm like, guys, I was saying that in Spanish football, they're not great at acknowledging their history sometimes. In Swedish football, terrible at it. They're awful at it. And I'm just like, man, this is like possibly the greatest player of all time, who is most associated with the World Cup, and who won the World Cup in Sweden that year. Made his World Cup debut there, and there's no evidence of it in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Honestly, it's crazy. Yeah. But so just to add to the comments I was telling you earlier, as if you needed any more convincing, for the sake of future generations, please, I am begging you, write about it. So there you go. You've got your task for.
Yeah. It would be nice to pursue. I mean, we've got plenty of time these days, so.
Yeah. So completely changing gears. Somebody wants to know what the name of the band was that you played in.
Oh God, that's like so embarrassing.
Oh come on!
Which one? So here's the thing, right? I played in bands, I guess, from I was about 11 until I was about 15. Oh God, it's so bad. The last one was called.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good, and you know it.
No, it's not good. The last one was called Anti-Faith because I thought that would be a cool name for a metal band. It was not a cool name, guys. Let's be honest. And we recorded. Actually, I'm glad because there's been like this massive Myspace crash now. It happened a couple of years ago. Something happened with their server.
What do you mean?
Yeah, they lost a bunch of stuff that was on their servers. So we used to have a Myspace page that had our demo.
Myspace didn't exist anymore, though.
It still exists, but all the music's been lost, or most of it.
Oh.
So thankfully, the musical evidence is gone. Though I still have it on CD somewhere in my mum and dad's house, I think. But yeah, it was bad. And we thought we were so cool as well. Like, I mean,
doesn't every teenager though? I mean, let's be
honest. Yeah. I mean, it was fun though. I missed that actually. Good. I don't know. There's something simple when your world is that small.
Yeah. And what would you say is the single greatest thing about Swedish culture and society that you love the most, that you enjoy the most about living in Sweden, and what you're most looking forward to whenever all of the dust settles once again?
What are the great? There's a lot of great things. Everything works. That's nice.
Yeah. I have to say I missed that.
Yeah. The one thing I sort of took for granted, which is it's definitely different in the UK, but it was even more different when I was in Spain, was how much time I'm saved here by the fact that a lot of like boring everyday processes are made simple for you.
Yeah.
So my tax return gets sent to me in by digital email, and I can look at it and then just put a code in my phone and sign off on it, and that's it. I don't have to think about it unless I have any major changes to make for it. And even if I do that, like, it's pretty quick to do. And like being set up as a company here is you just fill in a really simple, like straightforward form online, and you, again, your little digital code, and you sign off, and it's that. Whereas in Spain, I had to pay like €250 to get an accountant who can understand like pages and pages and pages of Spanish legal jargon to do it or whatever. So that's pleasant, and that kind of leaves you with a lot more time to do other more fulfilling things that are maybe a better way to spend your life.
Like fika.
Yeah, exactly, like drinking a lot of coffee and eating cinnamon rolls. And then the other one's in nature. I think that's what I like. Like, the nice thing about Stockholm is it's a city, but like it's kind of a city built around the nature rather than built on it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So, I mean, I could literally like walk 5 minutes in pretty much any direction here and be in water and go for a swim if I wanted to. It'd be a little bit cold right now, but in the summertime you do it a lot. And that's nice. And you don't have to go very far to be out. Like, there's a huge archipelago here that you can, well, we actually took a boat out to one of the places.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's pretty pleasant, to be honest. Can't really complain.
Brilliant. Well, any other final comments or anything you want to add before we say goodbye for the afternoon?
Not really. I think it's super cool that you're doing this. It's nice because I think at this time when there's no football to watch, it's really hard to come up with anything sort of unique or original, and you've managed to do that, and that's cool. And I think it's really nice to hear people's different stories about how they ended up in this crazy world. And then the other one is just that everyone stay safe and like stay healthy as much as possible, which is easier said than done. Yeah. But as crazy as it sounds, it'll all be over at some point. So yeah, try and think long term and not in the short term, if possible, is my advice.
Well, definitely very good advice, indeed, for all of us to follow for our mental sake, I would say, our sanity. But Lee, thanks so much. I'm so glad I got to see you. I feel like this was long overdue in general. It
really is. We should learn a lesson from this, and that we can actually, all of us, I think, maybe I'm finding this with my family. I don't know with other people, but it's like I'm video calling my family, at least one member of my family, like every day. Yeah. And I wasn't doing that before, and I'm thinking, Jesus, man, what's really the most important thing in the world? So I don't know. In some way, I think there will be some positive, as horrible as it sounds, to come from all this. That maybe we'll readdress the way that we all live a little bit, and maybe get to a more balanced way of doing so than we were before. I hope.
Yeah. See. Yeah, for sure. Definitely, that would be nice. So anyway, thanks so much. So
of course, anytime.
I'll talk to you soon. Man. Take care of yourself. Stay safe as well. Enjoy your coffee for all of us, and your cinnamon rolls. And man. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thanks, and thanks to all of you guys as well who are with us. We'll see you very soon, next week, in fact, for some more episodes of Tea Time Talks. In the meantime, stay safe, look after yourselves, and much love. Adios.